I am really happy to share this study with you. Uh, Let me start by saying that identity has become a key construct in English language teaching and learning in Colombia. And in this sense, it is essential for scholars who are interested in studying identity to ascertain the epistemological, philosophical, and pedagogical dimensions of the research and advances on identity, not only about studies abroad, but also in Colombia, where most of our studies are carried out. Um, During the presentation, you will see some works of art, images of works of art. These images are part of a different exhibitions and projects about identity, and are also an invitation for you to reflect on the way artists see and portray identity, apart from enjoying them, of course, if you haven't had the chance to see them. Um, This presentation is part of a broader review that I've been developing for a couple of years now. I've been working on identity for several years, but this particular study started just about 3 years ago within the doctorate program of education, with emphasis on ELT and interculturality at Universidad del Valle in Cali. Um, Today, I'm going to share some conclusions about the way identity has been approached by Colombian scholarship within the field of English language teaching and learning during the last decades, as published in the most important journals of Colombia that deal with matters of language education, bilingual education, language teaching and learning, and so on. For the study, for the whole study, I have reviewed more than 50 journals, but for this particular study, I review five. Sorry, I've been reviewing all the journals for Colombia, but for this particular study, I review 5 journals: Colombian Applied Linguistics Journal, GIST, How, ECOLA, and Profile. And I selected these journals because they fulfilled certain requirements I pre-established at the beginning of the study. They were to issue articles in the field of foreign language education, to publish them in English, to report works in the Colombian context with Colombian participants, or theoretical papers in the field, and to be available online by the time of the research. And the criteria for the selection of articles were these. The word identity in singular and plural had to be included either in their title, abstract, and or keywords, or any combination of those three elements. Then I found 35 articles that were the basis of this study that you are here sharing, or I'm sharing with you. Um, the journals with the highest number of articles was Colombian Applied Linguistic Journal with, I'm not sure if people say call or something like that, but I always call Colombian Applied Linguistics Journal, with 13 articles. That means 37.1%. Then Profile had 8 articles for 22.9%. How, 7 articles, that was 20%. Gist with 5 articles, that makes 13%, and that one's close to the mean. And ECOLA has the smallest number of articles with just 2 for 5.7%. I want to clarify that I included a range from 2000 to 2000. At the beginning, it was from 2017, then, and I extended it to 2018, and then to 2019, and now I'm working on 2020. But you won't see mainly those articles from 2000, from those 2019 and 20. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna mention a couple of them very briefly during my presentation. Um, in the same line, the year of 2012, what you see here is the year and the authors. Mm, the year of 2012 was the most prolific year with 6 articles, followed by the years of 2017 and 18 with 4 each one. 2006 saw the burn of the publications about identity. Some people, in some references, you will see that is de Mejia. In some others, she is just showing up as Mejia without de, but people know her both ways, de Mejia and Mejia. So that was the article that gave birth to the studies of identity. But I want to point out that is within those journals I studied and with the requirements, of course, that I established. The other one from 2016 was that of Hernandez Castro and Samaca Boorquez. Um, I want to mention something about this. Generally, most of these sources, if you're going to find them online, or if I'm going to share them with you, you will notice that they normally have two last names, like Samacao Boorquez, but I have just put one here in this presentation, not in the paper I wrote, but in this presentation only because of, a matter of space. Now, after 2006, articles about identity have been published continuously in any one of those Colombian journals aforementioned. During the first decade of the 21st century, 7 articles were published in the journals Colombian Applied Linguistics, GIST, and Profile. Um, I also want to point out that the year of publication of the first article, which is 2006, signals the relatively newness of identity starting in Colombian journals. Uh, the second decade of the 21st century witnessed an important growth in the number of publications on identity. For example, the first decade had 20% of the existing publications on this topic, while the second decade up to 2019 saw the appearance of 80% of the publications reported. This is important. Race in publications and can be, in my opinion, can be attributed to an interest in the field around the world that has also influenced the research topics in language education in the country. Finally, to finish this section, I just want to highlight that Torres Rocha is the only author who has published more than one article, 2 articles to be more precise, as a single author in these journals during the period of time since the 2000 and 2019. He published two in 2017 one and the other one in 2019. Other authors have published articles in collaboration with other authors, so I'm not mentioning them as as part of the statistic here. Now, in the study, I identify 11 broad areas that have been the focus of these authors in these articles, or at least in the articles that were published. Normally, when we start thinking about identity, we think it's just one thing: identity. But what I'm going to show you is, or what I'm showing now, is that it is a broader area of a study, and people, scholars, have been just specializing in different areas, in different fields within the broader, or if I may say, I don't like this term, but I'm going to use it like an umbrella term for identity. Cultural identity is the one that you see first on top. And ELT teachers' professional identity are the most frequent among these publications. Queer, LGBT, sexual, gender identity, and national, regional, local identity were grouped for their particular domains, namely in the first case, sexuality, and in the second place. Language learners' identity and pre-service teachers' identities are two important areas with 4 elements each one. They have in common the fact that they are related to students who are in most of the cases pursuing a degree in language teaching. I'm saying this because in some cases the studies are not specifically with the participants are not students who are going to pursue this bachelor or pursuing these bachelor programs. Besides that, 4 areas were studied by only one author or two. They are linguistic or language identity, social identity, ethnic identity, and youth identity. The focus of the journals may be the reason why the ELT teacher's professional identity has one of the largest number of articles. Cultural identity also ranked higher, probably influenced by current interests in intercultural communication and language education. Now, as it can be seen from these figures, attention has been paid to the most relevant aspects of in teacher education, teacher's identity and learner's identity, and to less frequent areas of studies such as gender identity and local identity, indicating, in my view, that trends in language education have permitted the research in Colombia. Now, one of the observations from these articles was the extensive range of different words accompanying the term identity. I found 228 different expressions and 1,416 occurrences. In the articles, the word identity is used either as the head noun, as for example, in gender identity, or the adjective or modifier of another noun, as in identity construction. Both words in these collocations are treated as one, as a noun phrase, as a lexical unit. This is a lexical sophistication, in my opinion, by means of which scholars working on the topic of identity show their knowledge of elaborate vocabulary. Then you will see sort of like a contradiction, because I'm just going to talk about how some of them are not deep, but that's the first view I have. The occurrence of collocations with identity signal high frequencies of use of sophisticated language in the text and serve as the foreteller of a specialized field of knowledge. They both contribute to delineate identity as a broad field of study within the ELT in Colombia, although consistent definitions of these terms in the articles have to be more rigorous. Now, I want to call the attention of the sources cited by the authors in these articles to back up the theories or the theory of identity. Readers and researchers, especially novice researchers, like the ones I worked with in my university, tend to revise the list of references of the articles in order to find out the sources cited. We just get an article and we go to the references and we see who's this person citing and, you know, who is he dealing with and so on. In the case of national articles, one may assume that the writers should have considered national and international sources. It is expected to find citations of Colombian scholars who publish in local journals and focus on domestic context, and worldwide scholars who publish in international journals and focus on foreign context. I use the term international in this talk to refer to those journals that rank higher in the quartiles or quartiles, I'm not sure about that, of the journals, of the most important journals in around the world. Now, the data collected show that the total number of sources cited in the 33 articles was 1,128, with an average of 32.2%, 32.2 citations per article. Generally, when we see the articles, sometimes we count the number of the citations, or if we're working with somebody else, the professors or researchers would tell us to include at least 40 or 50 and so on. So the average of these ones is 32.2, but we have to keep in mind that some of them are a little bit older if we see back to just like 14 or 15 years uh, of publication. Now, from them, uh, identity was 38.4%, with an average of 5.94 articles, 94 points per article. The overall frequency of citations about identity in these 33 articles was 18.34. The highest frequencies of citations are found in Torres and Rocha 2017 with 57.14, Lander 2018 with 52.94, and Ortiz 2017 with 50. These frequencies, what I think is they seem to establish a balance between the number of sources on identity and other topics. Some articles also show the considerable number of citations. For example, Diaz Benavides, 2013, Soler, 2012, Gomez Lobaton, 2012, and so on, with an average of 34%, 34 citations, sorry. And finally, this is something I want to highlight. 5 out of the 33 articles, 14.29%, did not cite any sources about identity. The question would be, why didn't they cite sources about identity if they were investigating identity? So this is an open question, for future discussion. Now, about Colombia, an interesting aspect comes here. How many Colombian scholars from this study have been cited in the 33 articles? Sorted out by national and international references, it was found that citations of Colombian sources in these articles is poor, 16 to be precise, since it is only the 7.69% of the total of 208 citations about identity. This is 92.31%, although the figure, become more dramatic if the number of Colombia citations, which is 16, is compared to the total number of citation. Remember, it was 1,128. In this perspective, only 1.42% of the total number of references is from Colombian scholars. It's like if you're reading an article from Colombia, with the context of Colombia, with Colombian authors, and you see that they are not citing Colombians. So one could venture to hypothesize that Colombian scholars do not base their publications on other colleagues from the country. Of course, there are other elements that we have to consider. For example, the number of publications. If we consider 35 or 40 or just 50, it may not be a lot compared to international scenarios. So I leave another question here open is, what is happening? Now, let's talk about the beginnings. The beginnings of identity theory in Colombian journals, remember the journals I'm studying, I'm really sorry about that, there are 2 articles. One is by Hernandez and Zamacá, 2006, and the other one from De Mejia or Mejia from 2016. Hernandez and Zamacá and Mejia are pioneering articles that address the topic of identity in the fields of language teaching and learning in Colombia. The purpose of Hernandez and Zamacá article was to explore the importance of national and foreign culture issues in language teaching. The articles were the report of small-scale research from a seminar on bilingualism carried out in a master program to determine how students interpret cultural aspects embedded in foreign language learning. Because of time limitation, I'm just gonna move on to talk a little bit about Mejia. Mejia 2006 article aims at showing, or aimed, I'm sorry, at showing that there is a need for an equitable language policy, which includes all the languages and cultures represented in the country. It also seeks to determine the influence of bilingual programs on the society, especially on the issues of tolerance. In her discussion, Mejia refers to identity established in two main areas of analysis: national identity and bilingual school identity. At first, she criticizes the idea of some people who believe that mm, identity is something that can be lost when in contact with other cultures. She opposes this idea and maintains that identity is something that transforms over time, influenced by experiences people lived. Hence, at least in the articles studied in this critical review and within the journals examined, Mejia was the first scholar to point out that identity is socially constructed. So it's basically 14, 15 years since we've been studying and hearing about social identity and how identity is socially constructed. Individuals hold multiple identities is another important aspect mentioned here. And because people have multiple identity dimensions, they can shift their identities depending on the context they inhabit. Mm, she asserts that people understand about themselves is, uh, sorry, she asserts that what people understand about themselves is mediated by what others think of them. Thus, the culture that bilinguals inhabit are seen as mirrors that reflect different instances of their identities, since those discourse communities are the cultures that shape their identities. Mm, um, Now, these two leading articles or publications about identity in Colombian journals studied the search to understand how identity is developed. The authors in general suggest that identity of the individuals is influenced by their culture, which is a hallmark of who they are, a mark that that can even be seen in the accent people develop in their foreign language. What is more, students and teachers institutions may be the context to create a culture that transcends the school borders and affects their national identity. Unfortunately, the articles do not show any references to the most well-known authors who had discussed the topic of identity up to the date of their publications. I would say James, for example, Med, etc. And the authors did not get deeper into explaining what identity means or meant for them, or how it should be understood in relation to the self. Mm, Now, in 2017, there were two articles, one by Cruz Arcila and the other one by Taylor. Cruz Arcila's article is a qualitative case study about EFL learners' development of intercultural understanding. In his view, the individual's own culture determines the way they see others, social or cultural identity, and even change or affect their identities. Mm, um, Taylor, on the other hand, explores new identities while establishing contact with others who are not necessarily different cultures, but anyone people interact with. The study explores the process of subcultural adaptation of college students. And in this study, Taylor uses the concept of third space, where students live experiences that allow them to interact and understand new identities. You will see that in some of the literature, third space is a recurrent term or concept. She claims that in interculturality, the individuals have to be people who are, quote, are more aware of their own lingua culture in a much deeper way, and who are open to exploring new identities and perspectives as part of their daily contact with others. This is important because it reaffirms the power of awareness of one's own culture and intercultural encounters. Unfortunately, she doesn't refer to Paul Freire, who was the linguist anthropologist who, sorry, Paul Friedrich, because it sounds to me like Freire, Paul Friedrich, who was the linguistic and anthropologist that introduced the term lingua culture to put together language and culture as a single word. It was published in 1899, so unfortunately, she didn't credit this important author. Now, um, let me move on to this new contributions. Uh, because of limitations of time, I will skip a lot of the authors who've been published and who you saw in the timeline that I presented at the beginning. So I will discuss some works from this period of time from 2008 to 2000, about 2017 or 16. Um, and I will concentrate on pre-service as well as in-service teachers. The first one is Quintero and Guerrero, 2013. And they are the first authors that examine elementary school teachers' identities. They hold the idea that teachers are social beings who see themselves from their own views and the perspectives of others. Um, then you will see Diaz, 2013, who reinforces the notion that identity is a social phenomenon that is developed through interaction, so that teachers' identity depends on the professional context and the way they interact with colleagues. Accordingly, if it is the student teachers' identities, pre-service teachers, it is in the context of the classroom where they emerge, the place where they exercise their professional practice. Mm, what is more, the type of environment influences the sort of identity that teachers develops. Additionally, the language spoken in the institution is a factor in identity construction, since the experiences um, and interactions of teachers and students are organized and negotiated through discourse, as pointed out by Norton and um, from the sources. And I want to point out, now that I mentioned Norton, I want to mention that Bonnie Norton is probably the author or the scholar who's been cited the most among the Colombian scholars who have published in these journals. Mm, Fajardo and Miranda noted another essential aspect of the professional development of language teachers, which is the relationship they establish with their students and the institutions they work for. Uh, Majoring in foreign language may not be an early decision. It is only when pre-service teachers do the practicum, when they discover if they really want to develop a professional career as language teachers. And this is precisely what Fajardo and Miranda aim at doing in their study, to determine the impact of the pre-service teachers' teaching experience on their professional development. What teachers leave their first teaching experience, they can get when they leave the first teaching experience, they can get meaningful insights that can motivate them to continue their professional education, advance into graduate studies, to live abroad experiences, and even to imagine possible teaching contexts where education could be better. Um, Guerrero and Meadows suggest, 2015, sorry, suggest that their training program be oriented towards local and global settings so that they can deal with challenges they face in their profession. Critical pedagogy should be a component in the preparation of language teachers so they can develop their global professional identity. Mm, then I want to mention Caviedes, um, Mesa, and Rodriguez, who explored collaborative work of pre-service EFL teachers to proofread academic papers and and the way this experience influenced their learning, their language learning identities. Working in teams is a way of developing the participants' potentials, since they have to be able to negotiate their ideas, roles, arguments, and strategies to cooperatively work and construct knowledge and identity. Um, these authors agree with Norton's 1997 definition of identity, where she insists on the nature of identity socially and situationally constructed. Um, Granados, I just wanna mention something about Granados. Uh, uh, Concludes in his study that taking a critical intercultural approach, that language teachers should recognize themselves as critical professionals, people who are able to produce knowledge. Okay, now, some in today, what's going on today, what's happening today, this is what I call it for this presentation, today's buzzing ideas about identity. So I took four authors from 2018 to tell you the following. For example, Carreño, what states Carreño is that people have to value their culture in order to build a well-found identity, and that also individuals should not diminish their own cultures or nationalities. Lander did a study at the University of Tolima in Ibagué. Sorry, Lander did a different study. I'm sorry. What Lander states is that gender and sexual identities of teachers are still overlooked today, and that the literature on these issues is still scarce, and it is not a common thing for queer teachers to make public their sexual identity, but they definitely, the context influences and affects the teacher's identity and how they officially share their preferences in public. Schweizler, this is the author from Universidad del Tolima. Actually, he's not an English teacher. He is a sociologist, Schweizler. And he states that identity will remain exercised depending on the value assigned to it, and that foreign language learning does not exercise a negative impact on regional or national identity. I think his conclusions, the design of his study is very good, it's very well, but the conclusions he drew were not, say, no, precise or not deep. Flores states that membership and interaction are key in local identity development, and that learning a foreign language facilitates the learning of foreign cultures as well as the understanding of their own reality and identity. Now, let me move a little about the trends and flows of the study. Just 1 second, because I need to check the time. Uh, the knowledge at all, 2011, have suggested that it looks like much of the research body on identity everywhere is not affiliated to any theoretical background in particular, and their methods are diverse but inconsistent. This is precisely one of the constants across the articles studied, except for the general agreement with Bonnie Norto's contribution. It does not seem to be consistent connection or a consistent connection among the research and theories. It's just, well, I'm going to take Norton's definition, but when you see the articles, you don't see that they are following or tracking the whole theories or the research they are stating they're proposing. Um, okay, I just have a question. There are 10 seconds left. Do I still have time?
Yes, Professor. Well, the meeting is supposed to end at 12:15, but we already started like a couple of minutes later. So I think that you may have like a little bit more time, but maybe we would need to withdraw the Q&A session.
What about 5 minutes to finish?
Yeah, it's okay, Professor. You can pay them.
Thank you so much. So I was saying that, okay, let me continue. It's intriguing to see that even though some scholars inquire different aspects of adolescence or adolescents, like Bonilla Salazar, who published a beautiful article in 2019, or Flores, who did one in 2018, they don't base their studies, or at least they don't publish that, upon the theories of scholars such as Erickson, who was considered to be the father of identity. Um, then some studies do not show they are based on theories of scholars who are considered to be the fathers of identity, and they lack consistency, and they lack sort of like um, deepness. Another important claim is that of um, the adoption of just a view of identity seems to be biased in a way, because it's always good to have different views of identity. Um, Several authors also failed to define or poorly specify their areas of study in their studies. It's also hard to see how researchers got deeper into the cognitive processes that may help see the changes in identity of the research participants. And it's also hard to tell how participants of this study develop or modify their identities. Mm, and I want to close by saying that the field of language teaching in Colombia is experiencing a non-reflexive wave, where the study of identity links the human beings and their identities to the teaching and learning practices. It is a new field. It is an important area, and we are still developing a theory that may help us get more as we keep studying, and more consistent we are with theories and practices and contexts. Um, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Pablo. We would open like 2 minutes, or maybe our dear audience can leave their comments or questions here in the chat in order for Professor Pablo to answer to them. But in any case, you would be able to access to this presentation and access to the opportunity to make questions and comments to Professor Pablo via WUBE. So anyway, if you have any questions or comment, maybe we can take a couple of minutes to do them here. But if not, or if any person from the audience wouldn't like to make a comment here, and they can address Professor Pablo via WOBA, I invite you one more time to fill out the evaluation form that I'm sharing through the chat. And once again, Professor Pablo, thank you so much for that thoughtful presentation, very inspiring one. I am one of the researchers interested into identity, and I think that your work is very nice, and it contributes to the development of the field of ELT in Colombia. So thank you so much. I don't know if any person from the audience would like to comment.
Adriana Barco says that she wants to come. Adriano Barco says that he wants to comment.
Okay, Professor Adriano, you can comment, of course. Go ahead.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for that presentation. It is very enlightening, and I think it refers to an issue that needs to be explored. I was thinking when you were presenting on the influence of teachers, like universities teachers, in kind of outlining the topics of interests for research in language teaching in this case. I saw some names like Yolanda Samaca, like Harold Castañeda, and they have been like big names in the field doing research on this. And I experienced that in the master's program, and it is that it creates a trend, not only in journals, but in the students' interests as well. So, sooner we were talking about how many of the master's theses are not published or are not or do not have like other spaces to be explored. And I would have a hypothesis here, and it is that like connected to studies inside all of the universities, you could find a lot of reinterpretations of those research studies regarding identity, sexual identity, queer, or gender identity. So I think your research also opens that possibility to explore and to see what is the trend and how is it that we are understanding, if we are understanding this topic of. I would like to just to hear your thoughts towards these ideas I mentioned. And again, thank you for your presentation. It was good.
I'm just going to take a minute to answer. I thank you so much for your contribution. And I agree with you. I think there are a lot of movements going on, and those are the decisions you have to make when you want to do a study like this one. That you cannot take everything. You cannot just study everything that is there, that is moving on. But well, there are a couple of things. One announcement is that a book chapter about identity from one of these studies is being published in the Universidad Distrital and Universidad del Valle in the doctorate program in education, this institutional program in education. So it's going to be published there. There's going to be another one coming article about this thing, the same topic. And I think one thing that we could do is to not to forget about the other movements within the master's and PhDs programs around Colombia, is to link together and to connect with each other, so we can share ideas and keep growing, because this is a field that is potentially given a lot of insight in education to us. So I think that we should keep the conversation and connect each other and talk about it and share what we've been researching. Because actually I'm researching on identity, but work abroad. I'm working on, I'm starting working abroad with the relationship between intercultural encounters and identity, but it's about language teachers. So it's a lot of, I'm sorry, it's a lot of going on. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Adriano, Professor Pablo, for your comments in the discussion. We would like to continue inviting the audience to enjoy the very last part of our conference and congress during this afternoon. We invite you to come back at around 1 o'clock for the last concurrent session, and then our last plenary session and the closing ceremony of this Congress. We thank you all for attending, for being part of this community. And well, thank you so much, Professor Pablo, once again, for your presentation.
Thank you, David. Take care. Thank you, everybody.